But of course, on everybody's minds today, following the sad news we heard yesterday, was the passing of Murray Walker, the legend. Martin Brundle joins us, and I know that word legend gets thrown around, but if you're a Formula One fan, if you're a motorsport fan, it's the only word you can use for Murray, isn't it?
Without doubt, and all around the world, of course, people heard his commentary and loved him, and he was the soundtrack to so many people growing up and getting a passion for motorsport through him and for Formula One in particular. I spoke to him a few weeks ago and I said, "How are you, Murray?" You know, I caught up with him. He was in a care home in the last year or two of his life. And next door in the care home was his lovely wife, Elizabeth. And he was quite comfortable. He really enjoyed it there. They looked after him. And obviously through the pandemic, it was very difficult to get to see him, or impossible. So we talked to him on the phone. And I said, "How are you, Murray?" He said, "I'm not very well, actually, Martin, but I don't want to bore you with that. What's going on in Formula One?" And he was pin sharp in the mind. He lost a bit of mobility in the later years, but and he still, you know, to his dying day, loved Formula One, loved everything about it, and Formula One loved him.
Oh, it did indeed, Karun, didn't it? I mean, the sport itself, he's synonymous with the sport, and for all of us growing up, and for you racing in it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up, 5,500 miles away from the UK. And I used to get these VHS tapes recorded by friends of ours with Murray's commentary. So I absolutely grew up listening to him, watching the races 4 months after Martin was driving in them. And he's a big part of why I fell in love with the sport, because he's made it sound exciting. He made it, his almost childlike enthusiasm was so infectious. You couldn't help but fall in love with the sport. And I think he was the voice track, wasn't he, to Formula One? And, through the eras, he worked with, obviously, James Hunt and then with Martin since '97. But, he formed that backbone, I think, of this wave of interest in Formula One through the 80s and 90s.
And Murray the man, Martin, I mean, I only know him as the commentator, but as the man, everyone talks so highly of him, and what a pleasure it was to just be in his company.
Well, he never had a bad word to say about anybody. He was very much a half-glass-full character, and went about the world and wasn't shy to tell it the way it was either, but he pulled his punches in the paddock, and that's why people liked it. But he would still call it out when he wasn't happy about something. And I stand beside him in the commentary box, and I'm absolutely convinced if I'd have walked out the back and gone home, he wouldn't have noticed something. He was so engaged in the race that was unfolding in front of him, and wanting to tell that story. What a communicator he was, and somehow he became legendary for making mistakes. That's how good he was. He could make numerous mistakes, and people loved him a bit more.
Well, he'd be watching, he'd be calling you up to find out what was going on at testing. Let's give a quick word to what's going on ahead today, Karun. The last day, what are the teams doing, and who's got the most work to do?
It's a big day. These are the best track conditions we've had all week. The wind is certainly less than it's been earlier this week. We're not expecting any sandstorms. The temperatures are slightly higher. I think the problem yesterday was we had a big variation between the daytime and the evening, and that confused some of the information we were getting. Red Bull need to build up on where they've taken off for the first 2 days, because they are in a good position to start this season exactly where they want, fighting for victory. All
right, great. Lots of work to be done by all the teams today. But of course, on everybody's mind is the voice of Formula One, the legend Murray Walker, the soundtrack for so many of us watching Formula One growing up through the years. So of course, he's on all of our minds today. Thank you, Murray, for everything you did for the sport and for the enthusiasm you brought to it, and for bringing it alive for all of us in the F1 paddock.